So Investigation with Dr. T was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Kimberly Durham. She said, do you think that you could do some type of an ongoing podcast about criminal justice? And I said, yeah, of course, definitely. And so that's sort of how it all started. So I thought that this year, what I would do is sort of call it the empowerment season. I really want to highlight and validate these folks who have turned their lives around. For the last season, we had on folks like Gregory Boyle from Homeboy Industries. He's a Jesuit priest who runs the largest gang rehabilitation program in the country. Let's look at folks who have actually succeeded at Homeboy, for example, and have a homeboy and a homegirl come on the show and talk about their experiences being in a gang. What was that like? What attracted them to Homeboy? And how has their lives changed and turned around as a result of it? This is really awesome. Justice restored, life after exoneration. And so I have an exoneree coming on, Willie McDonald. Willie was incarcerated wrongfully. I want to really zero in on what was that like for Willie. Dr. Barry Ryman, who is the clinical director at Recovery Unplugged, and Richie Supa, who is a former band member of Aerosmith. To have them both come on, talk about addiction, and talk about music. He's going to talk about how music as a modality can really be effective in helping addicts fight addiction. And of course, we're going to have student spotlight, former alum, etc., on some really cool and interesting topics. We are going to bring back Unfound at Denzel, most definitely. This season of empowerment, like the gangs, former gang members, former folks who are incarcerated, and folks who struggle with addiction. I think that those are just like really important for folks to hear, and our students to hear, and even our faculty to hear. Right.
All right. So thank you. I have tonight two very important guests. Anthony, I call him Tony Mottola. Dr. Tony Mottola has over 35 years of law enforcement and security experience and retired as a sergeant detective after 25 years as a member of the NYPD. And we have that in common. So we're like cousins. Anyway, he served as executive officer for the NYPD Intelligence Bureau's strategic unit, represented the Intelligence Bureau in numerous investigations, including the Boston bombing, civil unrest, mass shootings, and large-scale incidents outside New York City. He was a first responder and search leader for recovery efforts and supervisor of security details in the immediate aftermath of the World Trade Center attacks. And Dr. Mottola graduated from where else? One of the best programs that is out there, which is the School of Criminal Justice here at NSU, our PhD program, our PhD in CJ. And he's currently assistant professor of criminology and homeland security at University of Tennessee Southern. Also with us tonight is another alum. See, tonight we're spotlighting our alum and we're bragging on them. So Richard Schoberl. Am I saying that right, Richard? Schoberl? Did I say that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Has over 30 years of law enforcement experience, including the FBI, National Counterterrorism Center, and served in a variety of positions throughout his career, ranging from supervisory special agent at the FBI's headquarters in Washington to unit chief of the International Terrorism Operation in Langley. Dr. Mottola, this is Dr. Mottola. That's wrong. It's not Dr. Mottola. Oh, my goodness. No, that's not Dr. Mottola. That's Dr. Schoberl, is currently the program chair and director of graduate studies at the University of Tennessee Southern. They both work there and works with a nonprofit combating human trafficking, which, Richard, I want to talk to you about that at some point. Please welcome our two amazing alum. We're going to spotlight them both. We are so proud of them and their work, and they both co-authored a journal article, and they're also in the works right now of finishing up their book, so that they're going to be co-authoring their book on this same topic, national security and threats. So welcome. Thank you. I'm going to let both Tony and Richard, kind of like, opening remarks, if you will, on your own. And then I have a couple of questions that I would like to sort of guide us through the discussion. So Tony, you want to start?
Sure.
Say hi and a little bit about, maybe a little bit about your experience with us, and anything that you want to say as an opening remark, and then Richard will go, and then we'll get right into the nitty-gritty.
All right. Yeah, I thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. I love coming back. I'm a proud graduate of the doctorate program. I tout the program. As a matter of fact, Richard and I have a student that is applying for the program because we enjoyed the program so much. It's a great program. Very happy. I love talking about it. Coming from a local law enforcement background, investigations, and then getting my research knowledge and bringing about my research. Richard and I have worked together on so many things, including human trafficking. And we've kind of branched out into greater things. We've moved into, we're training local law enforcement here in Tennessee on sovereign citizens, human trafficking, labor trafficking. We're doing a lot with national threats, where we're trying to bring about a new training program. We're actually looking at, Richard, right? We're talking about extremists and extremism here in the United States. So we have quite a bit going on. But more so, we want to bring about that. A lot of this came from our knowledge of working here with the NSU and the research that was built behind it. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich. Can I let Rich jump on that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Excited to be here with everyone. Dr. T, I had you in class during my doctoral program. One thing, I feel like I should have got a discount somehow because I did recruit Tony into the program. Tony and I were talking about doctoral programs, and I basically said, I'm going to be honest with you. I've explored quite a few, and my experience at Nova was just so amazing. The professors there were so amazing. The practitioner-based experience coupled with the academia is really what kind of sold me. Listening to somebody who hasn't been there, done that, is really just telling me what you read in a book that I could already read in a book. But, getting that academics, that practitioner experience coupled with the academics is one of the great things I felt about the Nova program. And Tony and I have kind of taken that into the program that we have at the University of Tennessee Southern. There, we only hire people that have the academic background, of course, to teach at the collegiate level, but also those people who have that real world experience that can relate this to students who are coming in. And so a lot of lessons learned for both of us in our delivery of curriculum that we picked up from you and other great professors that we had at Nova. So I'm not trying to make a sales pitch for Nova, but trying to say that probably not a better program out there than Nova's.
I don't think they're going to give you a discount now,
Hey,
Rich.
Too late.
Hey,
Yeah.
5
years later.
Yeah. 1,000%. We are absolutely shameless in our plugging of the program.
Yeah, and you didn't even ask us for that plug, but we're gonna give it.
Yeah,
We're gonna give it to you.
We're gonna plug away. But listen, before I get into the questions, you said something, and this had come up. I don't know if it was last season, or 2 seasons before that. You mentioned sovereign citizens, and you're both shaking your heads. So please tell me, what in the world is a sovereign citizen?
But you want to do it, Rich? You want me to do it?
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you want to, are we talking in a general sense? We're talking about basically someone just believes that they don't. Before I want to go into an easy, because I don't know the listeners, but if we would just bring it out, someone just who believes that don't have government control, government has no responsibility over them. They have a free and right, and they're sovereign from the state within itself. They believe in certain very few constitutional issues. They don't believe in the hierarchy of the government. They don't believe in the court system. They believe the sheriff is the elected sheriff of of the state, is the only person in the county that has law enforcement rights. The federal government, FBI, all those others do not have any right at all. So they believe that the government is a private entity, as you might think. So essentially, removed from government, and they have the right to drive without driver's licenses, or they have a right to own a vehicle without paying for registration, things of that sort. So to give an idea, separating and taxes. Good, and I'll let you finish it up, Rich.
I was gonna say that's a whole nother podcast that we could do on the.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, let's.
Yes.
Let's.
For sure. And it's certainly a movement that we see, obviously they gain their traction off the narrative of the conspiracy theories. And obviously those rose to fame, certainly during COVID and its tenure while it was here. And that just kind of made this whole thing spread even more. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think the bigger part of that is what we've seen is the violence that has been associated now recently with them, whereas it's accelerated. We're having more and more violence with law enforcement with them, and car stops, and officers are getting hurt, shots being fired. So more of those situations, you're talking about not only just law enforcement safety and officer safety, but you're talking about the community safety. There was just recently a gun battle where one was shooting at the police running across the street and bullets were flying everywhere. So, it's what everybody, and obviously they have these frivolous lawsuits that they bring about, in courts and such, that they try to put on the law enforcement officers, the judges, the prosecutors, and try to stop them from prosecuting them.
Right. Would you call this radical extremists?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. You see a lot of, if you were to hold and the older people will understand this analogy, but a transparency sheet. If you hold a transparency sheet over the two things, all of them have an extreme right wing ideology, and that's kind of the narrative that has been espoused by this group, certainly.
Wow, Richard, did you just say transparency sheet?
Mm-hmm.
That nobody knows what that is, right?
I know, right? Back in the day.
I know. Wow. Yeah. So like
he used to use that on his projection screen.
That's right.
Does it seem to you like that we're in a fertile ground here with the divisiveness in the country, the polar opposites, the violence, the passion? I mean, it's one thing to be passionate about your side or what you think, that's fine. But when you start to raise it to the level of, I mean, look at this, the two assassination attempts, possibly a third plan or plot that was happening. I mean, I don't care if you disagree with the government or you disagree with a particular individual, but it's like it's risen now to this level of radicalism, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Am I the only one thinking that?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. When you look at the polarization that we are in society today, at no point in my lifetime or historically have we ever been, since the Civil War days, when we've had this great deal of polarization. The far right can't see the far left, the far left can't even see the far right. When you've got those movements that are going into play, and then the fact is we start seeing too this whole mass radicalization concept where on social media where it used to be that there was a trickle down effect, and it took a little time for some of these conspiracy theories, for some of this radicalization process to take place. But now what we're starting to see is it's instantaneously happen. So when it's instantaneously happen, and then how people shape those narratives online with the videos that go out there, and then the rhythm that builds on the social media apps, when you start looking at one thing and then the next thing you know, now your narrative is that's all you're seeing. That's being fed to you. So, and then you've got the news media also shaping, some of the narratives too. I mean, I remember when the news reported the news, but now they really narrate the news. So it's also too on what you see and what you read and how you're pulling that in. And when I tell people that they get their news, when people tell me, oh, I read that on Facebook or I read that on TikTok, time out. So you're getting your news from social media, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's not vetted, by the way. Just
right.
It's whatever I want to create. Right?
Yeah. public opinion. And then just to add to what Rich said, it's a term it's been flouted in some research. It's called reciprocal radicalization. And the fact that, the radical, they reciprocate against another radical group. So you have, and it just creates this effect between the two where one is created, whether it's the left or the right. So then the other one has to create to go against the other one. And you have these situations where you have, they meet up into, these protests and rallies and such, and causes violence.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, now I'm so psyched now about this conversation. When we talk about national security threats, for me, and Tony, I know you were also a first responder, ground zero. And Richard, I'm not sure if you want to tell me your background at that time, 20 something years ago,
If he doesn't, I will, just so you know, because he'll downplay it. So just
he'll downplay it. I want to hear, what was it? What was your role, Richard, during 9/11 and, the days and weeks and months that followed?
And don't downplay it. You're retired. You can talk.
Yeah, during 9/11, I was actually working counterterrorism for the FBI. And, it's like Tony and I were talking about some of the things that, when we look at the level of where you were during 9/11, how it changed our lives, how it changed our everyday lives, and what we were doing. And I actually recall on the day of 9/11, we were actually, our FBI tactical team, our SWAT team was actually training at a military base for a situation that was going to be a hazmat terrorist attack. So we were training with live gases and simunitions and so forth, and how to respond to these type of attacks. And on the morning of 9/11, we were actually in the situation room, and everybody's sitting there, and we're all waiting for the scenario to come up. And about that time, you've got 24 pagers that all go. And a pager, for those of you who are younger, is almost like a cell phone, except you can't return the call from the pager. And so the pager went off, and everybody's pager goes off 911. And at that time, they're showing the scenario of a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And we're looking at the TV, and we're like, now, how could this be? Like, how are we going to respond to this in the middle of, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, in the middle of nowhere? And then that's when the pagers go 911. And then that's when everybody's color dropped their face. And we're like, oh no. And, at that time we're into full mode, and they activated our counterterrorism team. And we immediately went into, obviously, investigation mode into the, who went into the attacks and who did who carried this out and so forth. And then that took out a long, battle of, the two wars that happened after that, and then, hunting down the terrorists, the mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and then, Osama bin Laden. But, at that time, earlier today, Tony and I were talking, I was like, one of the problems with this is that, like, the FBI, we didn't even know what radicalization was.
Mm-hmm.
And if you told somebody was radicalized, they'd look at you like you got one eye. They're like, what does that even mean? Right. And, since that time, we beat to death the study of radicalization, but it's not unique. It's not, homogenous for every single person. Right. And so it's different, and it makes it even more difficult for us to combat. It's even different than for men and women. Right.
Right. Tony, you want to weigh in?
Yeah. I mean, we discussed it at one other podcast, and I was out. I was on task force, and I was mobilized and went there I got stuck in the tunnel. We had to take a bus over, while one group took a Staten Island ferry over to the lower Manhattan. We had to go through another direction. But I think that the bigger point was being part of the Intelligence Division at the time. Intelligence Division was a local law enforcement agency, learning, just like the FBI, what is radicalization, becoming from a local law enforcement agency, policing crime, to policing the world. We started, the Intelligence Bureau ended up building what is radicalized, a person, and what are these groups that hate each other, because we weren't used to that. So, and then we ultimately led, right before I left the NYPD, we had 18 locations all over the world. NYPD people stationed all over the world to report on crime and and embedded with the local law enforcement agencies. And
Right.
and in another question that we might have later on, but bring it up now, the NYPD just stationed, they got a new station, Bogota, Colombia. They just put somebody in Bogota, Colombia. So obviously
Excellent.
we could see where the build is from that. I mean, we could
Right.
talk about that in a little bit with ports, borders, and
So they,
migration.
are they calling that counterterrorism or joint terrorist task force or what?
Well, it's in the intelligence bureau. They do it through the liaison program. So it's in the intelligence division's
Right.
liaison program. So it's our overseas liaison program. The intelligence division is on one side and the counterintelligence group is on the other side. All fall under the same deputy commissioner, each have individual chiefs.
Yeah.
So although they might work separately, differently on different operations, counterterrorism is built more on training, identifying, reporting, running the
Right.
SHIELD program, things of
Yes.
that sort.
But
Intel, informants, undercovers, blah, 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 blah,
right. So, and whoever wants to take this question first is fine. What is the most pressing national security threat that the public and even our students, staff, faculty may not be aware of?
You want to go, Rich? You want me to go?
Yeah.
Richard cleared his throat, so
Yep.
that
Oh, well.
meant he
It's like the
wanted
Brady
to
Bunch.
get ready to
I'm going to
say
do this
something.
and look at Richard like
There
the
we
Brady
go.
Bunch.
Okay,
You know,
Richard, it's all you. Spotlight on you.
Even 4 years before 9/11, years before 9/11, George Tenet, the director of the CIA at the time, kept saying, "Hey, look, guys, the lights are blinking red. We're going to start seeing some things happening." At no point in history have we had such a heightened level of threat. And at that time, the FBI, CIA wasn't sharing information with each other, and the FBI and local wasn't sharing information with each other. Obviously, it took until a catastrophic event like 9/11 happened before people actually said, "Hey, sharing information is probably a good thing." And then information sharing started happening. And we're at that point now. Let's fast forward, a couple decades. We're at that right now. We've got the director of the CIA, we got the director of the FBI, we got the DNI, all saying, "Hey, guys, the lights are blinking red." At no point since 9/11 have we ever been in a more heightened level of threat than we are right now. Okay. So at this point, we got, and this is not an immigration debate by any means, but we got 3 million people that came through the border last year that we know about. We got another 2 million that we came through the border last year that we don't know about. We know several hundred were on the terror watch list. We've got 2 assassination attempts that have taken place. We've got an Iranian plot to try to assassinate the former president. We've had, both failed attempts of the assassination president were pretty much just dumb luck that it actually didn't happen. We've got a war that's combustible right now in the Middle East that's spreading, and that's a concern for the mass radicalization that we're starting to see, where we're starting to see, what do you identify as? What does a person identify as? If they identify, and you've got the attacks on what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Lebanon, certainly that's going to radicalize a lot of those who are Islamic extremists. And where those attacks are going to happen really depend on who's supporting Israel. Was the U.S. supporting Israel? Obviously, certainly we are. And in that, you're going to start seeing people here radicalized. So I always told people throughout my career, the professionals are predictable. It's the amateurs that you got to be concerned about. It's hard to know about a lone wolf situation, those who aspire to carry out an attack, and those aspirational attacks are almost uncoverable. And if we're not out there training people to what to identify, how to look for this, and it goes uncovered, then certainly the lone wolf attack has to be our greatest threat right now.
Okay. Tony, your spotlight.
Okay. I'll jump on to, a subject where, Rich just jumped on for quite, because it said, this is not, we're not looking for politics. If we're talking about national security threat, we're going to be honest and talk about it. The national security threat issues that we both have seen and what we brought up in the paper is our porous borders. There is situations where we have to worry about individuals coming across the border. Latin America has been recently seen as connections to the Iranian regime, and Venezuelan government has been within itself. We're having issues with Maduro and the elections, the national elections that they had down there, in situations with the American government. So we have a influx of people coming across the border, but the issue is that transnational organized crime, human trafficking, human smuggling, drugs, fentanyl, things of this magnitude are starting to enter the United States. And where I look at it from, and I'm sure Dr. Flesko will look at it the same way, from a local law enforcement standpoint, if you look at it from a local law enforcement standpoint, we don't have the databases and the systems to help local communities and personnel to identify, people that might have done criminality in another country or another state. And if we're not able to identify those people and help the victims and stop violence and stop the homicide, to bring the homicide rate down, I find it a situation where a local law enforcement officer who's in uniform on a street corner cannot identify the person that they have in front of them that might have committed a robbery or an attack. So the national security threat as a huge standpoint, everybody looks at it from a standpoint of, how many terrorist attacks percentages have happened from, outside threats, as opposed to domestic threats. But I think it's a greater thing. You have to look at how many homicides have happened in situations, and how many, victims are there in the local law enforcement level in dealing with these communities, because we don't have the ability to have confidential informants or other people embedded with these people if we don't even have people who speak the language for these local law enforcement agencies, and they're at a disadvantage to help police and help the communities, themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's.
Yeah. Thank you. Richard, did you want to piggyback?
No, I think Tony,
okay.
No. I wasn't looking to piggyback on that. I think Tony's spot on. I think, the porous borders are some of the biggest problems that we have right now,
Yes.
from both, a counterterrorism, national security issue, but certainly, when we look at cartels and we look at smuggling and we look at human trafficking and we look at all of that, that's all, national security. It's all related to this.
That's right.
Particularly when they're monetizing, smuggling people into the country, and those people might, i.e., be terrorists.
Exactly. So who's got the dogs?
Not mine.
Yeah, it's
It might be mine.
good. Well, because we're dog lovers here, Richard. We're dog lovers.
Well, this is a Shih Tzu, but you'd think it was like a Saint Bernard, or at least
Thank God, I thought you were going to say something else. But anyway, so hey, look, you mentioned it earlier in some of the conversation already, but how would you assess the role of technology, like specifically cybersecurity, in shaping modern national security challenges?
You want me to start off?
Well, he went, so like he started singing already. So Tony, sing. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, well, I think in the cybersecurity sense, I think we have to look at, there's a lot of aspects you could take this, because you have insider threat issues in which, cybersecurity is for private industry and the public industry, right? I think that if you look at the standpoint from our electric grid, I think our infrastructure is not protected enough in the cybersecurity world. I think the technology for protecting ourselves from attacks, from data breaches, even ransomware, malware. These are situations that we're seeing that are coming out of state-sponsored, countries, whether they're communist or other regimes that we are against the United States. I think there must be more done to put forth the protection of that. Even, as far as, China stealing information for patents to try to, create patents of their own using technology that's done here in the United States. These situations, I think, in a cybersecurity standpoint, is also a national security threat, because, we have elections coming up. How much of that is going to be forced where the cybersecurity can actually take control of an election and effectively change an election process?
Yes, exactly right. So, Richard, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. Tony, I think you and I saw the same video that someone floated us. That was an actual AI generated video of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, where they were, from the naked eye, clearly it looked like they were actually talking about what they were talking about, but it was totally, controversial. politics from both of them, and it's foreign governments trying to shape the narrative here in the United States. It's certainly a concern to national security. That the whole AI technology is obviously going to get out of hand, and when you've got people who live on their social media, the narrative of what they view life as is what they view on their social media. And if a foreign government is creating that narrative for them, then they're certainly shaping their ideological beliefs. And, we're starting to see that from a counterterrorism standpoint. We're starting to see that in the Middle East, in Gaza and so forth. And you're starting to see, the war in there, and you're starting to see some neighboring countries shape that narrative that Israel's just going in and they're just killing babies, and they show a quick clip and that's all they show. So they're using the social media as a way to shape the narrative around that, to kind of manifest that ideology, and radicalize people on a mass level, on a mass scale. And we saw this years ago, decades ago, when we saw the Islamic State do this, in Syria and Iraq, using social media as a means to do it. And from a law enforcement perspective, how do we police that? How do we police the internet? How do we get this public-private partnership expanding beyond that, where we see social media giants actually take corporate responsibility for actually policing their own websites as to what's being produced. And that's the biggest concern we can see from a counterterrorism standpoint, is the narrative that's being created that's radicalizing this ideology.
Great.
Tony, you want to weigh in?
I just want to add one. Yeah, I just want to add one thing, because Rich brought up something that we saw a video together. We actually saw a video, and I'm sure it went all over the internet and social media, where they actually took Trump, Harris, or Barack Obama. They took Biden, Putin, and several, and they actually AI'd their faces onto situations where they were committing robberies with firearms in stores and such like that. And it was so well done. Someone said to me, when is it going to be that someone might actually get blamed for a crime by being able to interject someone's social media by using AI to take someone's face and put it on someone else's face? And I don't think that we're that far off from that type of cyber attack, where we can create surveillance video of people committing criminal acts and use the AI to put their face or to change someone's face. What do you say, Rich?
No, I completely agree with you on that. And it's really all about shaping that narrative, whether it's from a criminal standpoint or a terrorism standpoint, on, the technology is allowing this to happen.
Right, exactly. So look, I mean, we talked about the several assassination attempts on former President Trump, and a lot of heat on Secret Service. And so there's some weaknesses. Look, I'm a big believer that we can always improve. And that when we start saying, oh no, we're perfect, that's when there's no room for growth. So do you think there are weaknesses in our current national security policies that need immediate reform? And why do you think they're overlooked? Richard?
Hold on, so ready? Hold on.
Well, trying to make this less political and more, tactical in the means that,
Right.
the problem is these policies are shaped from, political administrations. They're shaped by the narrative that administration wants to do. Right. So what's the priority of your administration? Is it keeping the country safe? Well, trying to be bipartisan in this whole answer is the fact that, I don't think letting 5 million people into the country unvetted is actually safe and good for national security. Okay. I think that when you bring in unvetted people, and I'm not against immigration, I'm not against people coming here. I mean, unless you're a Native American, we pretty much all immigrated here at some point. So I think that, the problem is we're letting these policies be in shape, are shaped by our political views and by those administrations. That's a huge weakness in what we're doing. I'm not going to sit here and armchair quarterback what Secret Service does by any means whatsoever. But, you've got to answer this question. Were the security failures because Secret Service didn't do their job, or were the security failures because Secret Service couldn't do their job because they didn't have the resources to actually complete their job? And then that's a whole different ballgame. And that's a political issue.
Excellent.
That's an underfunding issue. And that's when you look at it. So yeah, was it a security failure? Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. The Secret Service
Right.
even admitted to it.
But I
But
mean, hey,
why did that happen? Is it
Right.
because they didn't have the resources?
well,
Kind of hard to put 20 people out there when you only have 10. So
Right.
is
Yeah.
what it is, right? Is
Well,
what it is.
and listen, I mean, biggest national security failure, in my opinion, this is my opinion, was 9/11.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you
Yeah.
got to be kidding me. Like,
Yeah.
how did all of that happen?
Exactly.
Like, really, how? And I like what you're saying about, things that get politicized become much more of like an ignition on the fuel.
Yeah.
And it dovetails with radicalization too, I think. So Tony, I know you want to say something about that last question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to play off of what Rich said, I mean, let's think about it in the aspect of also, I mean, again, we're not going to talk, and I don't even like that we have to continue to say it's not about a politics thing, but even you take a situation like sanctuary cities with local law enforcement and situations that they have, someone we were talking about skewed data, the situation of crime or migrant crime. Most states are not even allowed, most local law enforcement agencies are not allowed to identify, if someone's an illegal alien on their criminal arrest report or on their complaint report. It skews the data in any type of crime data situation. So my issue is with these borders and with these other situations that we have local law enforcement agencies that are coming into contact with people that are not able to document the proper things that they're supposed to be documenting. They're not able to bring about what has actually happened. And for us as all researchers, that skews data completely. And it makes a situation that we are not able to effectively correct something. I think that policy needs to change in people drawing lines in the sand and saying, no, once we have something in place, we don't want to change it, or we don't want to, we make it better? Just like you said, Grace, nobody wants to change it because they're afraid that it'll go away we have to be better at identifying this, because I really believe that the situations that we're having with human trafficking, right? We have traffickers embedding themselves with traffickees on situations, and they're getting away with things. So, and that's a whole nother conversation that we could have on situations. But I really truly believe that is another situation in national security that we're not effectively taking control of in policy. We're not changing policy. We can still have a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state. It has to have certain certain guidelines to help law enforcement help victims.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we can't not say, I like skirt around the issue of the Middle East and what a hotbed this is. And what this is also doing, what messages are being sent now to, like both sides of the argument. And it's not for us as academics or researchers, scholars, to start taking sides necessarily, but to point out that, both sides have a point, but yet the whole environment is such fertile ground for radicalization and for threats, real threats, right? Richard, what do you think?
Oh, well,
about what's happening in the Middle East?
Let's just talk about the I guess the unprofessional exit of Afghanistan a few years ago, and Tony and I did an article on the exit from Afghanistan and what it's created. I mean, Al Qaeda's created about 10 or 12 new terrorist training camps in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan now is basically an area controlled by a terrorist organization called the Taliban, who is now their legitimized government and who basically holds two of the largest and most influential terrorist organizations outside of Hezbollah and Hamas, the Islamic State organization, and then also to Al Qaeda. And so, when you're looking at that and you're looking at the ability to recruit, the ability to train, we gave them all their weapons. I mean, I would have thought we would have learned our lesson from '87 when we did that, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and then that, came into Al Qaeda. It's like history repeats itself. It's like we go through a couple decades and we forget what we did that messed things up, and now we're going to do it all all over again. So
Yes.
it's almost like we
Yes.
have amnesia. We don't
Yeah.
learn from this because, the problem is that politics should never, ever dictate national security, but unfortunately they do,
Yeah.
and that comes into the problem. And in the U.S., and we're over there, trying to maintain stability within the region, providing those individuals with, what they need to keep themselves safe and protect. And then you've got bad actors like China, bad actors like Russia, North Korea, Iran, all funneling money to terrorist organizations, all trying to disrupt the apple cart per se,
Right.
so that they can do what they want, kind of disrupt America and our efforts and the stability we want to have in the region. Let's just face it. I mean, Israel is our only safe hub that we have in the region. We have to support what's happening with Israel. It wasn't Israel who invaded somebody in October 6th. It was literally Hamas. And I think people are losing sight of the fact of that actually what happened. They're looking at what's reactive from that. But what's reactive from that is what's driving further and further radicalization. And that's what we're going to start seeing, these pop-up attacks in Europe and the US and elsewhere. And it's not and Tony and I were talking earlier about this. It's not an if, it's a when. Because in law enforcement, you can watch some of the people some of the time, but you can't watch all the people all the time.
Right. I know. I mean, look, if you ask one side, they'll say, well, this didn't just start in October of 2024, right? Or October 20, no.
Three.
Yes.
Yeah, three.
Where are we?
2023.
2023. My God. Yeah. So like this didn't happen then. This happened like a long, very many years ago, etc. And people dig their heels in, like you said, because it's very meaningful to them. It's very close to home. And then when you add religion in the mix, it becomes really difficult to try to have any kind of normal discussion, because right away we're putting, the stamp of approval of a higher power on all of this. And
Well, no, that gives it
crazy.
That's the crutch, right? That's the crutch right there. Religion is the crutch. Religion not only normalizes this, but religion gives it credence. It is the reason why they do it. And I always tell people, when you're willing to die for your belief, how do you expect people to combat that? How do you expect people to combat what people are willing to do for their belief? You can't bomb an ideology. You can't do that. And that's not going to change what people think. That's just going to create more and more. It's like a starfish. You're going to cut it up, but it's just going to keep coming back.
Well, it goes back to what we had a guest. I feel like it was last week, or maybe it wasn't, but it was great Frank Williams, former prosecutor, human trafficking. You might know him, but anyway, he talked about Hercules and the Hydra and the cutting off the head, and how it just like cut off one and like 500 more grow. So, Tony, I want to give you a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, in our article, what we really wanted to do, especially within our research, is to identify what people might not understand. And that is how much the Iranian regime is embedded in Latin America, and how, going back in 1992, there were 2 terrorist attacks that recently they arrested one and prosecuted one that was involved in that attack, and that Hezbollah had a hand in that attack, in those attacks. There has been, a long-standing thing with fuel that has a situation with, Iran with Iran and Venezuela, and in regards to, the largest consumer of fuel is China. And how do they purchase fuel? How do they get fuel? Especially if there's an embargo against Iran, who can't import their fuel. So it goes on the black market, and it starts by proxy supporting terrorism in other ways. And in our research, we also found that the cartels have been working with some of these state-sponsored terrorist organizations. And I think that is important, because if people don't understand that that's right in Latin America, and that connection to the United States, especially when we're talking about porous borders, we could have that situation where having people are flying in from overseas, from international areas into Cuba, Latin America and other areas, and then making their way up into the United States from these sections. And if we're not capable or not aware of this, and we are not at least documenting this, that is a situation. And again, it falls back to, you have these small police departments in these small towns or even in these large cities that don't have the capabilities to identify people. Right. And it's going to fall on them. It's going to fall on that local community that's going to say, how did this happen?
Good. Richard, looks like you want to.
Oh, no, but I will add to what Tony said. I mean, when you think about, terrorist attacks, they didn't start in New York City, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Well, Rich, yeah, it's a good point, because the reason, if you notice on my bio, it said that I worked outside the New York City area. Well, the terrorist attacks, not one terrorist attack was planned in New York City. They were all planned outside New York City. So the whole point of our department, our unit, was to work with agencies outside New York City so that we can avoid another attack, be the tip of the spear outside the city to avoid another attack. Okay, Rich, I'm sorry.
No. You just emphasized my point, which I was emphasizing your point, is the fact that the planning for all these took place outside of that region.
Right.
And because they took place outside of that region, that's why it is so important for the local and state law enforcement to be knowledgeable of what's happening.
Yep. And collaboration is key to all of this. And I think that that's where we're failing. I think policies and such are putting barriers for collaboration, and we're not able to collaborate, and work with other agencies without having some sort of barrier stopping that. And as you know, Grace, we've dealt with that over the years as local law enforcement agency in the NYPD.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you, for that. So we are now actually going to shift into the Q&A portion of our evening. Dr. T, everything with the weather and everything has currently lost power, but it's okay. We're going to push ahead. We planned for this. We're good.
All right.
And you know what?
You're doing a great job, Ian.
Thanks so much. And it's actually perfect timing, because we would have been moving into the Q&A anyways. Okay. So the first question that I have up for you guys is kind of going back to, you guys were mentioning different things related to AI and just kind of technology. And of course, you mentioned a couple examples of where AI was used and really just posed a danger. So really somebody asked, Stephen actually asked, does technology currently exist that can identify AI generated videos or photos?
I always wait. Do you want to get Rich? You want to do it?
Yeah, yes, certainly there is technology that exists that can detect whether a video has been altered or identified. But does that technology exist for the common viewer who's reviewing TikTok? No. For Snapchat? No. For Facebook? No. So, your everyday user, those individuals who are prone to becoming either radicalized or creating an extremist ideology, whether it's left or right, are not even going to take the time to go, I wonder if that's legit. They're probably not. They're probably just going to see it and go, I knew it. And then they're going to keep going through there, right? So that's the problem that we're talking about, is that these videos that are being put out are short, they're creative, they're snazzy, they appeal to that crowd that wants them. And then once they've viewed that once, now they're on that rhythm where they're going to keep getting those type of videos. And when you're fed with that same type of stuff, then that's what your belief is, right? That's what you're going to believe. Even though somebody may create a counter narrative, you're never going to see that counter narrative, because you're only going to see what you're going to be consuming.
And I believe, to add on to what Rich is saying, is that AI generated faces on computer and computer systems, software is coming about. But that's, I think, where the situation is that they're having an issue with, because, as we started with AI and as we started with AI video, it starts, think about it. Think how fast your iPhone picks your face up to do facial recognition. That's a technology that it wasn't there many years ago. Facial recognition is starting to be used, at sporting events for people to walk in to try to see if they can get, a terrorist walking into a sporting event or trying to cross. So those same situations, those same AI things, we want possibly maybe even on the border, right? To get someone coming through that might be a terrorist, that might be put into the system. So there is a place for AI and AI facial recognition, but there's also, I think, there's always going to be that nefarious entity that's going to try to use AI and AI face generated material for those reasons.
Thank you. And I think another just great thing that I really want to harp on that you guys kind of mentioned is really just that, especially because you guys mentioned like TikTok, Instagram. We have people, I'm sure, of different age ranges just kind of on the webinar today. But another big thing really is just the how easy it is for these apps to kind of really foster a kind of echo chamber environment where it's like, you know, TikTok has like the For You page, and it's like a lot of times people will forget that the information that you're getting is specifically curated for you because they want you to stay on the app. So it's a lot of things that's going to be tailored to, like, they know that this is what you believe. So you're just going to keep getting information, whether it's fact check or not, that is just going to echo what you've already believed. So I think that was a really great point. So thank you for that. And just kind of to extend on that, then I wanted to ask, what is some advice that you would give to the regular layperson that is just using these different apps and not really able to differentiate between what is fact and what is AI? Which of course is hard because this is, you know, this is current technology, but in your experience, what's something that you would give as a recommendation?
Well, Tony's not even with us tonight. That is an AI generated
Yeah,
photo.
I'm not here.
So, but when we talk about this, you know, for people who've been in school and have written papers, we don't just use one reference for our source, right? For our papers that we write. Otherwise, we're just regurgitating the narrative from that one source, right? So I always tell people, I'm like, where'd you see that at? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, yeah, well, did you look here? Did you look there? Did you look here? And you know, my son just recently graduated college, and during his during his tenure in school, he basically, I was like, you know, what are you watching? Where are you reading your news? Whatever. He goes, you know, I look at both news sources in the U.S., news sources outside the U.S. I look at multiple different news sources, and then I formulate my opinion based on the regurgitation of the data that I get from all of those news sources. And I was like, okay, that's actually pretty good. I feel like I raised you good. But you know, when you look at it, is I always tell people, like, get your news from more than one source. Certainly, don't get it from social media. You know, get it from a reputable news site. And you know, your news site can be right leaning, it can be left leaning, it can be middle of the road. Maybe try all three, and then you may get the correct narrative after you've digested all three of them to kind of see where it is. But the same way it would be for if you were writing a paper, use more than one reference.
I love that you're saying that, and thank you so much to the team for having my back. Yes, we lost electric power and internet, but it came back on. So thank you. We're almost done, and But I'm so glad you said this, Richard, because so many people are looking for a bumper sticker news item. You know, the elevator speech. You know, something that is just like a very short little blurb of all of the information on a complex issue. Like, there's no way that you can just have what I would call a bulletin board answer, like we see a lot with the spin doctors on all these news shows. I remember, you want to talk about transparency, which nobody else knows what that means. It's like a transparent piece of paper sheet, plastic, but anyway, or a pager. But here's another one. I mean, look, the bottom line is, when I was growing up, there were 3 news channels. I mean, that was, and they all went off at 11 o'clock, you know, 6 o'clock news, 11 o'clock, and then that was it. You know, today there's so much news, and it's a product, it's an entertainment, but it's very dangerous. It can be a very, very dangerous, I believe, radicalization that's happening. And I blame the media a lot for being a force multiplier.
Yeah, I think one of the guys I was just talking to today from one of the news agencies said to me, "There's no such thing as an investigative journalist anymore." He said, "Investigative journalist is a dying breed. It's more commentators who are doing analyzing and public opinion based off of social media." And I truly believe that. I think that the investigative journalist that used to be out there doing those investigations and actually doing research is dying out. That's why I always tell my students, you must research.
Yes.
Because if I was to ask any one of these students right here, and I know you had you up and Eddie here, let me ask you, would you let your kids on social media? Yes, no?
Um, it's definitely complicated. I can see why my kid would want to be on social media, and I definitely get it because I'm on social media. I think I would want to be able to monitor and also limit the amount of time they spend on social media. I would want to keep an open line of like conversation. So I want my kid to feel like they can be able to ask me questions about things they see on social media.
Right. But you wouldn't want to just freedom, like to let them do what they want.
I will not be giving my children unrestricted internet access. Absolutely not.
Right. So that is the thing. And that's what I do exactly in my class. I ask the students, I say, and most of them tell me, don't let your kids on social media because they have young kids. And that's the thing that I want to bring out to everybody is if my own students are saying my kids shouldn't be on social media, I look at them and say, maybe you guys
Right.
should start limiting your social media, start limiting some of those things, especially if you're going. It's not that I don't want you to have some sort of, life, but you could go back to just like being like meeting people face to face.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't think you need a like from somebody from across the
Yeah.
you from
That's right.
another country saying
Yeah.
you look great.
Yeah. That's
You
right.
know.
That's right. Eddie, do
I
you have
think
any, Annie? I'm sorry.
no,
Do
you're
you
good.
have,
You're good.
go
I just
ahead.
kind of wanted to add on to that really quickly. I think also with just kind of the rise of just the digital age and just how much access there is to social media and AI and the different things, just kind of going back to your question about like whether I would let my kids use it. I think the biggest thing that I would want to look for really is just kind of finding that balance because while, like, especially being somebody that like I was born in 2003 to not, age myself, but kind of got to grow up like, yes, I still got to go outside and do those different things, but I did also grow up with social media. We have more and more people that are younger and younger growing up with social media. So I think it's important to not just completely restrict it, but to kind of give them the tools to use social media and these different technologies properly. Because then if you do like wait and it's like, oh, like my kid isn't going to use social media till they're 18, then they're going to get 18 and have no media training, not know what they're doing. And that could be even more dangerous than if you were to kind of just like slowly bring them into it and explain like why it's dangerous, why they need to use it properly. Which is also like I hold a similar sentiment to like classrooms where as of right now like completely restrict AI use because then it's just going to make people be even sneakier with it rather than being like trying to think about these technologies that are coming out as more of a tool to
Yes.
what I mean, to help like if
Yes.
it's something just to kind of like help say something like for example like if I'm gathering my thoughts to help with Gavin, just like I write my thoughts and it's helping me write it in a more you know what I mean, but not writing a whole paper because then that's not using it as a tool, that's using it to do the work for you, but
Right.
finding ways to integrate technology because that is where we're going. So I think it would be a disservice to not use it at all, but yeah.
I think that's a really such an articulate answer to AI. We're so afraid of it, but if we don't learn it and learn how to use it effectively, we're going to be really left behind. So, Annie, thank you for that. Was there any other question? There's the chat is blowing up. YouTube, I mean, it's like a lot. So I don't know if I don't think we're going to be able to get them all. But
Um,
did you have some?
I can bring up one from the YouTube chat. Some of the YouTube chat is just not questions, but they're having a very engaging conversation on there.
Very good. Excellent.
Um,
I love that. That means that our guests are engaging and exciting and the
No, they just
topic
want to
is
disagree with us.
fascinating.
Yeah.
But is there at least one question? Because I do want to wrap up, and I don't know if Cameron also wanted to weigh in, but go ahead, Eddie. Maybe just one
yeah.
comment, question, thought, something.
I think one that got brought up was from a Jonathan Zitters. He mentioned, like I know we mentioned using news outlets to find like your sources more often, but he did bring up that traditional media at times is not doing much better than social media in some aspects with like journalistic integrity. Think like Fox News, probably not your most reputable news source. So I was just wondering if you had any advice on how to like spot an actual reputable news source and find good like media outlets.
Good question. Seeing that we've been talking about the media as a force multiplier, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Is there a particular outlet?
I many times look at BBC, France, 20, was it 27? France 27. I look at various news sites outside of the, I always look at their ratings too. I always look at media ratings on some of them, and try to see the bias on certain situations. You can go far to the left, you could go too far to the right. So there's a wide variety of groups to look for, media things. So what I do is I look up a source, and then I determine from that source, whether it's Wall Street Journal, Forbes, or New York Times. I'll look at various ones and see. And sometimes one article in the New York Times is straight down the middle, and another one might be far to the left. So it really takes some investigation just on one source. What do you think, Rich?
Well, I'll talk about my media bias here for a minute. So I'm a regular contributor to both Fox News, CNN, Al Jazeera, Al Hur. I've been on all of them. And I'll tell you right now, news media is a business. Okay. That's what it is, right? They're a business. They're there to generate views. They're there to generate clicks, and they're gonna generate those views and those clicks based on the narrative that they spin to the people who watch those. So let's just say majority of the people that watch Fox are right leaning, right? They're not as far right leaning as those who watch Newsmax, which is even the furthest right that you could probably go. And and the leftists are going to view CNN, but not as far left as those who are MSNBC. So, I mean, I agree with Tony. If you want a good view of what's happening in the United States, it's not politically biased and no tilt either way, then you probably should look at something like the BBC or an outside the country that's actually looking in, because they're going to report more factual stuff versus more factual stuff that's left leaning or right leaning. Because
Absolutely.
in the US, these are businesses, right? They're here to make money. No, there's no nonprofit news organization out there. They're here they're here to generate profits, and that's what they're here for. They're here to curtail to their audience. You can just watch by the commercials in each one of them who they're targeting, right? And that's just kind of the way it is. And that's why you need more than one source. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And just like, don't believe everything you see here. Or I just whatever it is, be a good consumer of research. So that means, you don't have to be a PhD. You don't have to, become a PhD in CJ here at NSU.
Right.
But you can and you should.
Right.
But more importantly, I mean, look, these are complex things. And like I said, if there's an easy answer to a complex issue, I'm moving on. Yeah. I'm moving on to something else. I want to uncover and discover what is the truth. And I think that today, we don't believe anything.
No.
We either believe everything or we believe nothing. And that is dangerous. I believe
the news should spark your curiosity. You should see it on the news, and that should not be the Bible verse. That should be, you know what? I'm gonna look into that, and I'm gonna see what I'm gonna start peeling back that onion. Is that true? Is it real? Is it not real?
Exactly.
Etc. Right?
Exactly. Hey, listen, I want to let Cameron have an opportunity. This is he's new to the team. And Cameron actually lost power in the very beginning of the night. And here he is on his phone, a real trooper. So, Cameron, was there anything that you wanted to weigh in on, or maybe ask a question that you saw in the chat or whatever?
Yeah, I did see one that I did find interesting. This goes a little bit back to when we're talking about the journal. Tammy asked, how did you decide what topic to write your book on? Is it something trending in criminology, or is it something that is a main focus to you?
Well, I think that's actually a good question, because it's a two-part. It is trending right now. National security, and the post-border situation and the influx of migrants, which has led to a lot of what we call SIAs, right? Or persons of interest from countries of interest that are coming across the border, as well as the transnational organized crime situation and the human trafficking situation. So with the huge fentanyl issue going on, and the situation of, since 2016, we've had over 350,000 fentanyl deaths since 2016 here in the United States. And if you were to take away Narcan, you would probably have about another 100, 300,000 deaths, because Narcan has helped save people's lives. So it would be way more in the overdose. So these situations, I think, is part of the national security. All right, it's a national security situation, as well as, what is current, what is going on right now with situations like Dr. Shobro brought up, situations that happen in Iran, right? Situations with what's going on in the Middle East, right? And all that kind of led to how we decided on this is going to be where we're going to go with this, because we want to be at the forefront in the research, and our ability to research is be at the forefront of that, and try to bring a global perspective of something, but also bring it to light of people who might not see that happening, or put the pieces of the puzzle together, right? Be the puzzle maker and bring it together to one. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, no, I'm completely in agreement. And I think the fact is that, Tony and I do a lot of collaborative work together, and because we bring in different perspectives. I'll bring in the federal perspective, he brings in the state and local perspective, and then it gives it that holistic approach, going at it. We both got, decades of counterterrorism experience from different degrees. So we sit there and we dissect the problem, and we'll write it out and look at it. But what we try to focus on is what's trending, what's the problem, and then what's the best practices to try to solve that problem. Because you hope, in turn, there's always been this problem with, within some of the law enforcement community, that they don't like that public-private partnership, kind of steer away from the fact that there are academics that are out there doing the research on what could make it best practice. And that's what Tony and I are trying to deliver, is like, hey, look, we've been there, done that, lived that, and here's what we're doing now to try to refine that and make it better, so that we're not repeating ourselves 10 years from now. So we're not having another 1987 where we trained Osama bin Laden and those in Afghanistan. So we're not fast forwarding another 15, 20 years and doing the same thing with the Islamic State, and now doing the same thing in Gaza and Iraq. So we're trying to get to the point where we're like, hey, this is what's happened historically. This is what we need to do futuristic. This is what we need to do going forward. This is what you need to look at.
Yeah, Rich, did you have to say decades?
Yeah.
you made me feel
listen,
so old.
all
Anne
I
says she
know-
was born in 2003.
Yeah, right. Sent shivers up my spine when she said that. So yeah, I'm like 2003. Oh dear God.
I think my
Okay.
socks are that old. I'm not sure.
2003. That's like, wow.
Listen, I'm teaching since 1985. Okay, I'm teaching since 1985.
I want to see what your hair looked like back then.
It was
it like this?
It was jet black. It was jet black. But
at least you had hair.
At least, yes, better gray than toupee.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, listen, I'm going to put Richard on the spot now. I would love to be able to talk to you about coming on the show next season and bringing, if you can, a survivor of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so think about that. See, I like doing that. I like pressuring the guest in front of everybody. This way they can't say no, right? But
yep.
I'm loving that idea if we can do that. But anyway, last word. Anything like, we got a mess. We talked about a mess. We've got a big mess. We've got media as a force multiplier. What are your suggestions, resolutions, if anything? Tony, start us off. Richard, you'll end, and then I'll say my last goodbye.
I think that we should start coming together. I think there's been too much division. I think there's been too much division in politics. I think there's been too much division in society. I think we need to start coming together, and we start the process of creating policies that work. Start working together again, as in the past. This division on the politics, I think, is drawing a situation that everybody's, as I mentioned, taking a line in the sand, and they don't want to change policy because they're afraid to change policy. And I believe that at least will be a start, right? Because really, as we said, politics is the driver of a lot of national security, even though it shouldn't be. It should be protection, but it's not. It's policy. It's politics. So I think we need to bring about more people working together to get those things done. Rich?
Very
I'm gonna-
nicely said. Very
Yeah.
nicely said. Like a real alum of NSU's School of Criminal Justice PhD program alum. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Tony said in support of the fact that we need bipartisan policies and legislation that keeps the country safe. That's not can be striked away with an executive order. I mean, call a problem and then deal with the problem, regardless Republican or Democrat polarization. We got a problem with the border. There's no doubt about it. It's not, it's much, much further than the immigration issue. It's the non-vetting of people coming across this border who are cartel members, who are gang members, who are hardened criminals, who are terrorists. And, when you bring these individuals into the country, it's not like they cross the border and they're like zap, change their attitude, change their mind, change their motive. No, they're coming here for a reason. They're not the person that, they're not the other people who are coming here. And people are like, hey, guess what? That's not everybody. They're not all like that. And I'm like, that's great. It's not an issue. But I'm going to give you a bowl of Skittles. And there's 1,000 Skittles in there, but 2 of those are poisonous. Help yourself. Which one, what are you going to do? You don't know which 2 they are. So that's the aspect that we face is we got a bowl of Skittles and a couple in there are poisonous. So how are you going to dissect that? You can't. And we've got to come together. Like Tony said, we've got to have better policies, within the government and legislation that are not acceptable to, or even subject to change because an administration changes.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
And Rich, Grace, before we jump off on that, I also want to say we would talk about the border, but it's not a one-way thing. It's a two-way thing because remember, Canada is complaining about guns and drugs flowing up from the United States into their area, and Mexico is complaining about guns and firearms being crossed the border going south. So it's a two-way street when we talk about border policy and border protection, right? We want to stop guns flowing out, and we want to stop drugs coming in, and we want to stop that from both ends.
But you know what? We've been singing this song for a really long time. When we talk about drugs, we talk about anything organized crime. It's profitable. We talked about this with Frank Williams when we're doing human trafficking. And Richard, you're probably really well aware, and in probably more ways than you don't even want to be involved, or to know about. But we've got to stop the demand.
Yeah.
There's a supply demand. This is economics. All of it is economics. So if we can maybe educate, raise consciousness, raise awareness, it's the demand side. So if we can stop the demand or slow it down, way down, your supply is gonna dry up, right? Or am I being naive?
No, you're showing your age because the egg commercial where they said this is
Don't
your
tell
brain
me
on
that I'm showing my age.
Yeah, the brain.
Oh.
Well, remember the commercial. This is your brain on drugs, and they had the
Yes.
flying egg. And those
Yes.
commercials disappeared.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a $250 billion a year business. So 250
right.
with a B. So
Yeah.
when you look at it, you can only sell a drug once, but you can sell a person over and over again. It's a reusable commodity. I know this is another podcast,
It is
but
another
podcast. People are reusable commodities, so they can keep reselling them and keep making money off of them.
Yes.
And certainly,
Yes.
we've started to see the cartels diversify their smuggling routes to not only profit off of smuggling drugs into the country, they're using it now to smuggle people into the country.
And guess what? Yeah,
Multinational
poverty.
corporations.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's a complex. All of these are complex issues,
Yeah.
and not answered with a little bumper sticker answer. But the thing that's really important to remember is that poverty also plays a major role in some of these third world countries, and places like Afghanistan, let's say, for example, or Mexico. Poverty is real. Hunger is real in Thailand. It's like, right. So this is why we can sell children easily. But it's that root cause. That root cause analysis is very, very important to the discussion, I think. Anyway, guys, listen, this was unbelievable. I want to thank you. See, we could go on and on. We try to keep it at an hour if we can, especially when we're we're all under right here, right now, a tornado watch. So I don't want to be in the Wizard of Oz. So we're gonna end, we're gonna end here. But Richard and Tony, thank you so much for your wise, insightful discussion tonight. Let us know when the book is out. We definitely want to spotlight you as our alum who published a book. So when that comes out, please let us know. Definitely we'll be getting in touch with you to talk to you about maybe next season, something that we can do together.
Sovereign citizen, human trafficking.
Sorry, say it again.
Sovereign citizen, human trafficking.
I
Well,
love it.
hey, January is
I love
Human
it.
Trafficking Awareness Month. So FYI, January Human Trafficking Awareness Month, great time to spotlight it.
All right, Richard, great. That's great. Exactly. You better believe me that when I get off this, our team will be contacting you. So thank you again. Really, many thanks and many blessings on the book and all of your work. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you, Richard, for being here. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Annie and Cameron, of course, and Eddie for being my right and left hand and backing me up when I lost the power. So thank you so much. We planned that effectively and we were able to execute it perfectly. So thank you for that. And thank you to our deans, Dean Durham and Dr. Kushner and Dr. Castro, everyone at the School of Criminal Justice, as well as Fishler College of Education and the Department of Human Services also. So thank you all. Have a safe, blessed night, and we will see you next week. Thanks again for being with us.
Thanks, guys.
And so, Annie, since you're the host,